what you've opened this show about detailing, what the evidence displays. And then you have, Giuliani and Mnuchin going on television being actually laughable in their response. But that's the point. It is not supposed to clarify. It's not supposed to give you a straight line argument that this is not bad or there is no problem. It is to create the level of confusion. Joe, you have it exactly right. The president comes out and tells you, yeah, I did it. So what? And so as you started the show talking about and reading reports about there are no consequences, that's the world in which Donald Trump thrives, because there have been no consequences. So it's now a matter on something so important as this, whether or not the country is willing to make the president pay a consequence for behavior that leads to real questions about impeachment. And I think that this is something over the next 24 hours or more we're going to have to figure out as the members on the Hill get microphones put in front of their faces to see whether or not they're willing to hold the president to a standard that we've held every president who's had the job before.
Well, and John Meacham, what great illumination we have into the soul, not of America, but the soul of the Republican Party. You have one Republican after another trying to brush aside the fact that their president, the commander-in-chief, spoke to a foreign leader 8 times and intimidated him 8 times to use his personal lawyer to dig up dirt in a foreign country against a domestic rival. 8 times. Mitt Romney even came out. It's surreal. All of it is so surreal. And all of it eventually will damage the Republican Party in next year's election. But Mitt Romney said, well, if Donald Trump actually did speak to a foreign power to have them dig up dirt, that would be very troubling. The Wall Street Journal reported even before that tweet that it happened 8 times. And Donald Trump admitted that he did it. And yet they decide to live in this never land.
That's a great way to put it. It is never land. And, history, there's no once upon a time. There's not going to be a happily ever after. But there can be actual moments where we face facts. Eleanor Roosevelt said that's the test of a great government, a great society. Can you, in fact, face facts, however uncomfortable they are? And what I think is the great story of our time, honestly, is the extent to which 45% of the country, many of them Republicans, have suspended their critical capacities, have suspended their essential, dare I say it, patriotic instincts to follow this particular leader because of the will to power. So we're the party of Eisenhower, Reagan, Bush are comfortable with a president who conspires, who colludes, whatever word you want to use, with foreign leaders to affect our democracy? How do you square that?
Well, he said he would. He told George Stephanopoulos he would do this.
Yeah, again,
no Republican really stepped out.
John, all in broad daylight. No Republican complained when Donald Trump told George Stephanopoulos that he would work, that he would collude with foreign powers to try to get dirt on his rival. And here, another good word for you, extort.
Yeah.
In this case, there are reports that he actually was extorting the democratically elected president of Ukraine, who had already seen his country invaded by Vladimir Putin. And there are reports that he extorted him, saying that he was not going to get military weapons unless he dug up dirt, cooperated with his personal lawyer to dig up dirt on his domestic political rival.
One of the things that's happened here, I've been thinking about this all weekend, is there are a couple of really interesting entries in George H.W. Bush's papers through the years. One was where he confronted the John Birch Society back in the Harris County in Houston in the mid-1960s. And he's looking at these folks, and he says, their eyes aren't focused. They're living according to a narrative in their heads that does not actually track with reality. and he saw it a little bit later, some in the 80s. And I think that's just, it's gone from being a fringe, the Birch Society, which is what Richard Hofstadter was writing about when he defined the paranoid style in American politics. It was for that moment, that was the occasion for that essay. But the paranoid style has gone mainstream. And I think one of the great questions of the era is going to be, who wants to be Margaret Chase Smith? Who wants to be Joseph Welch, the lawyer who said to McCarthy, finally, have you no decency? And I promise you, there's a historical legacy, there's a historical halo ready to be grabbed if people will stand up and say, no more.
Yeah, but you know, Mika, there is, as John said, there is a suspension of belief. And we've seen it even with some of our friends who will talk about how many miles of the wall Donald Trump has built. When Donald Trump's own administration, when the statistics in Donald Trump's own administration show that 0 miles of new wall have been built, but you can't tell them because there's a suspension of belief. Because in speeches, Donald Trump says, oh, we're building this wall so quickly. But and here you have a suspension of belief that somehow it's okay that 8 times the President of the United States pressured a foreign leader to dig up dirt on his political opponent in the United States.
I think it's different this time, and here's why. First of all, if you say, oh, to a Trump supporter, a Republican who's serving President Trump told George Stephanopoulos that he would work with a foreign leader to dig up dirt on an enemy, political enemy, that person would say, oh, he doesn't mean it. He just says that. He doesn't mean it. Well, guess what? It appears that he does mean it. But when the information comes out, I don't know if the whistleblower is going to have to step out on his or her own, or if this information will come. Right now, this information is being covered up. But at some point, if and when the information comes out, I think Republicans will be in a very different position. They will not be able to say, well, he doesn't mean it, which is what they usually say to protect him. Up next, we're going to, Adrian Elrod, I do want to ask you, what is the risk and the gain for the Biden campaign?
Well, I guess to an extent, Mika, anytime Hunter Biden's past dealings in Ukraine are making the news because of this situation, that's not a great place for the Biden campaign to do or to be, even though obviously Hunter Biden did nothing wrong. That's been investigated. That's been made clear that he did nothing wrong. But I think the gains are far outweigh the cons here. I mean, Joe Biden can now go out there and say the president of the United States is trying to pressure an ally to get information, to get opposition research, to get dirt on me and my family. I mean, that's something he can take out there to voters and really, you know, make it clear how disdainful this is and what a gross abuse of power this is. So I think ultimately the pros in this situation far outweigh the cons.
And again, it is. You talk about Americans hating politics.
Yeah.
You talk about an inside game, rigging the process, and we've talked about how Donald Trump is rigging the process on the Republican side to make sure that as many states as possible cancel Democratic elections in the primary. I mean, he's learned from Vladimir Putin the way you get 100% of the vote is you just cancel the elections, and that's what Donald Trump is getting Republican operatives to do across the country. So he's rigging the election that way. He's using his power now to try to rig the election. So a foreign power is pressured to actually try to dig up dirt on Joe Biden and his family, and is, to use the word that Rudy Giuliani used, in actions that most voters would consider to be very slimy, especially since every investigation has shown that Joe Biden not only acted properly, but did what democracies across the West were asking him to do, and that is clean up Ukraine by getting rid of a corrupt investigator.
And politically, this is losing ugly for the Trump campaign. Everybody who knows Joe Biden and supports Joe Biden will dig in deeper. They will be deeply, deeply, deeply concerned and upset about what Trump is doing to the Biden family. You have Joe Biden, who lost his daughter and wife in a car accident and then lost Beau Biden to brain cancer. This is Joe Biden's surviving son. This